The winter she returned. The wind had a cruel way of singing across the moors, a low, endless hum that seemed to carry the ghosts of the past with it. The Harcourt estate stood against that wind like a solitary sentinel, grey stone rising from the frost-bitten earth, its windows glinting faintly beneath a heavy winter sky. Inside, the great hall was quiet, save for the faint ticking of a long-case clock and the occasional crackle of the fire. Lord Nathaniel Harcourt stood before it, his hand resting upon the mantel, his gaze fixed upon the flames as though they could burn away his thoughts. He had once loved winter, the silence, the discipline of it. But that was before the war, before the fire and blood had stolen the warmth from him. Now the cold merely mirrored what he carried inside. He had not expected her to come back. The letter had arrived that morning, folded with a precision that spoke of hesitation. Her handwriting, unmistakable even after all these years, had bled slightly into the paper from travel dampness. The words had been few. "Nathaniel, I will return to Harcourt Hall before the week's end." 7 years of silence, broken by a single line. He had read it once, twice, a dozen times, until the ink seemed to blur before his eyes. And still, he did not know what he felt. Anger, longing, fear. When the clock struck 5, the butler, Mr. Pembroke, entered quietly. "My lord," he said, his voice low and respectful, "a carriage approaches." Nathaniel's head turned sharply. "In this weather?" "Yes, my lord. It appears to be Miss Ashcombe." The name spoken aloud in that house again seemed to echo through the halls like a ghostly summons. For a long moment, Nathaniel did not move. His hand tightened around the edge of the mantel. Then, with a breath that trembled more than he wished, he straightened. "See to her things," he said, "and prepare the west wing." Mr. Pembroke hesitated. "The west wing has been closed for—" "I am aware," Nathaniel cut in, more sharply than he intended. "Open it!" The butler bowed and withdrew, leaving Nathaniel alone with the fire once more. He remembered that wing, the bright laughter that had once filled it, the scent of lavender that had followed her everywhere. It had been hers, until the day she vanished. He turned away from the fire and crossed the hall, boots echoing against the marble. Through the tall windows he could see the carriage making its slow approach up the drive, the horse's breath rising in clouds of white. Snow had begun to fall, dusting the iron gates and the bare trees that lined the path. When the carriage finally halted before the steps, Nathaniel stood in the doorway, his coat collar turned up against the cold. The door of the carriage opened, and she stepped out. Eleanor Ashcombe. Time had changed her, or perhaps it had only revealed her. The girl he had once known had been all fire and laughter, quick to challenge him, quicker still to forgive. The woman before him now moved with measured grace, her face pale beneath the soft grey of her travelling cloak, her eyes shadowed and unreadable. "Nathaniel," she said softly. Her breath misted in the air. He inclined his head. "Miss Ashcombe." The faintest smile touched her lips, not of amusement, but of understanding. "After 7 years, I thought you might call me Eleanor." "And after 7 years," he replied evenly, "I thought you might not come back." Her eyes flickered, a flash of pain quickly hidden. "I hadn't planned to, but some promises refused to stay buried." He said nothing. She turned her face slightly, taking in the looming shape of Harcourt Hall behind him. "It hasn't changed," she murmured. "Nor have you," he lied. She gave him a long, searching look, as though she saw straight through the layers of civility and restraint he had built over the years. Then she said quietly, "I wish that were true." The snow thickened around them, settling on her cloak and in her hair like pale dust. For a moment, neither moved. The silence between them was heavy with what had once been spoken, and what had never been. At last Nathaniel gestured toward the doors. "You must be cold. Come inside." As they stepped through the threshold, Eleanor paused, her gaze lingering on the vast entrance hall. Every detail was as she remembered. The grand staircase, the portrait of Nathaniel's late father, the scent of oak and old stone. But there was something else now. A shadow, faint but unmistakable. "How long has it been this quiet?" she asked. "Too long," he answered. Mr. Pembroke appeared with a small bow. "Your rooms have been prepared, Miss Ashcombe." Eleanor nodded her thanks and began to follow him up the stairs. But halfway up, she turned back. Nathaniel was still watching her from below, his expression unreadable. Her voice, when it came, was soft but firm. "You haven't asked me why I came." "I imagine," he said, "you'll tell me when you're ready." "And if I never am?" He met her gaze steadily. "Then I suppose I'll have to live with that." For a heartbeat, the air between them seemed to hold everything they had once been. The stolen glances, the whispered promises beneath summer skies, the final night when everything fell apart. Then she turned away, and her footsteps faded down the corridor. Nathaniel stood there for a long time, the snow melting in his hair, the firelight flickering behind him. He had thought he had buried her memory long ago, along with the boy he once was. But now, as the wind moaned through the chimneys, he realized with a quiet, terrible certainty he had never stopped waiting. Shadows of the past morning broke over Harcourt Hall in a pale wash of light. The frost had spread overnight, silvering the gardens and the blackened branches of the elms. Inside, the air was still thick with that curious hush that only old houses possess, the kind that carries memory like dust. Eleanor stood by the window of her chamber, fingers resting on the cold glass. The view before her was hauntingly familiar. The stretch of moorland, the lake beyond it, the chapel ruins half buried in snow. Time had not changed the land, only her place within it. She drew her cloak tighter. 7 years! 7 years since she had fled this place, leaving behind everything she loved, and one man who had every right to despise her. Behind her, the door creaked open. She did not need to turn to know who it was. "Nathaniel," she said quietly, "you always did have a gift for sensing me." He stood at the threshold, dressed in dark riding attire, gloves in hand, hair still damp from the morning mist. The years had hardened him. The gentle air of Harcourt had become a soldier, a commander, and now a man who carried silence like armor. "You're up early," she said, turning to face him. "So are you. I couldn't sleep." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "Then we have that in common." A pause settled between them, not quite awkward, but filled with too much of history to be easy. "You've changed," she said softly. "So they tell me." Her gaze lingered on the faint scar that traced from his temple to his jaw, nearly hidden by the morning shadow of his beard. "War?" "France," he replied simply. "And you returned?" "Eventually." There was something in his tone that made her chest ache, the quiet exhaustion of a man who had seen too much and found little peace in returning home. Eleanor looked away, her fingers brushing the velvet drapes, and yet Harcourt feels as though it's waiting for someone still. "Perhaps it is," he said, eyes fixed on her. When she met his gaze, she saw no anger, only restraint, the kind that hurt more than any outburst could. "I owe you an explanation," she murmured. He exhaled, long and slow. "Do you?" She hesitated. "Would it make a difference if I said yes?" Nathaniel took a step forward. 7 years, Eleanor. 7 years without a single word. And now you walk through my doors as if you had simply been away for a season." Her lips parted, then closed again. She had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times during sleepless nights, and now that it was here, every word fled her. "You wouldn't believe me," she said at last. "Try me." She turned toward him fully now. "The night I left, I found something. Something that changed everything. I meant to tell you, but you vanished," he finished bitterly, "leaving me to believe you'd chosen someone else." Her eyes widened. "You thought? What else was I to think, Eleanor? You disappeared without a letter, without a trace. Your family claimed ignorance, and your brother refused to speak to me. Do you have any idea what that did?" She took a shaky breath. "Couldn't tell you then. It wasn't safe." "Safe?" He gave a short, harsh laugh. "For whom? You or me?" She flinched, just slightly, but enough. Nathaniel sighed and looked away. "No, don't answer that. I'm not sure I want to know." He turned toward the door, then stopped, hand on the frame. "You'll stay as long as you need. Whatever your reasons for being here, I'll not see you turned away." Eleanor swallowed the lump rising in her throat. "That's generous, given what I've done." He met her eyes. "It isn't generosity, it's unfinished business." Then he was gone, leaving her alone once more. Later that afternoon, Eleanor wandered the west corridor, her footsteps echoing softly against the floorboards. The walls were lined with portraits, generations of Harcourts, all solemn-faced and proud. But one painting caught her eye, a small, half-finished piece tucked away at the end of the hall. Her breath caught. It was her, or rather, it had been, the painting he had started before everything fell apart. Her younger self, smiling faintly beneath a summer sky, her hair unbound, her gaze turned towards someone unseen. Nathaniel had painted her once, but he had never finished. Her fingers brushed the edge of the frame. "You should have burned it," she whispered. Behind her, a quiet voice replied, "I tried." She turned sharply. Nathaniel stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Why didn't you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because," he said after a moment, "even anger fades, but the memory stays. I couldn't destroy that too." Something broke inside her then, not loudly, but like ice cracking beneath weight. "I never meant to hurt you," she said. "Then why did you?" Tears threatened, but she held them back. "Because I was protecting you." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "From what?" "From the truth." The silence that followed was heavy. He took a step closer, his voice low. "Then tell me now." She looked up at him, eyes bright with something between fear and longing. "Not yet. Please, Nathaniel, just not yet." He searched her face for a long moment, then nodded once, not in acceptance, but surrender. "Very well." He turned away again, but his voice lingered in the cold hall. "Just know this, Eleanor. Whatever you're hiding, I'll find it. I won't be kept in the dark again." She stood there long after he had gone, staring at the half-finished portrait. Her reflection in the glass wavered as she whispered to herself, "You already are, Nathaniel. You just don't know it yet." That night, as the snow fell thicker across the moors, Eleanor sat by the dying fire in her room, unfolding an old piece of parchment she had kept hidden in her travel case. It was the letter, the one she had written him years ago but never sent. The ink had faded, but the words were still legible. "Forgive me, I cannot tell you what I have learned. Not yet. But if I stay, you will die for it. Know only this, I have never stopped loving you." She stared at it until her vision blurred. Then, quietly, she folded it back and slipped it into the hidden pocket of her gown. Outside, the wind rose again, howling through the chimneys, carrying with it the echoes of the past. And somewhere, deep in the house, Lord Nathaniel Harcourt dreamed of a promise he did not remember making, and a truth he was not ready to learn. The letter he never sent. The third morning dawned grey and restless. A storm was gathering beyond the moors, the kind that rolled in heavy and unrelenting, swallowing sky and land in one sweeping motion. Lord Nathaniel Harcourt rode out before dawn, seeking the quiet he could never find within stone walls. His black stallion cut through the frozen mist, hooves pounding the earth, steam rising in plumes from its flanks. He rode until Harcourt Hall was a shadow behind him, until only the open wilds and the whisper of his thoughts remained. He did not know what to make of her return. Eleanor's presence stirred too many ghosts, memories of laughter in the orchards, of music drifting through summer windows, of her hand slipping into his beneath the old ash tree, when neither of them dared speak what they felt. He had been 23 then, young, proud, and entirely hers. And she had been a promise he never should have made. When he finally returned to the estate, the servants were bustling nervously. A new arrival had come, a messenger from London, carrying correspondence sealed with the crest of the crown. Nathaniel took the letter, scanning it quickly. His brow furrowed. An inquiry into the disappearance of Sir Percival Ashcombe, Eleanor's father, reopened after 7 years, so that was it. The storm she brought with her had a name. He dismissed the messenger and went straight to the study, locking the door behind him. The scent of old paper and ink filled the room, grounding him in its familiar austerity. On the desk lay a box, mahogany, small, and locked. He reached for the key hanging from his watch chain and opened it. Inside were letters bound in faded ribbon, her handwriting again, all dated before her disappearance. And at the bottom, hidden beneath them, lay his, the one he had never sent. The paper had yellowed with age, the edges curling slightly, but the words still burned. He unfolded it slowly. Eleanor, by the time you read this, I shall have left for France. I cannot take your silence with me. It will undo me before the enemy ever can. You once asked if I believed in fate. I told you no, but I lied. I believe in yours, and that is my undoing. If I return and you are here, I will ask you again to marry me. If not, then I shall know that some promises are not meant to be kept. Yours always, Nathaniel. He stared at the ink until it blurred before his eyes. Then, with a low breath, he folded it again and set it beside the sealed crown letter. The past was not content to stay buried. That evening, Harcourt Hall came alive for the first time in years. The local magistrate, Sir Edmund Rowley, a broad man with a politician's charm, arrived under the guise of civility, though his eyes gleamed with quiet purpose. Lord Harcourt, he said as they met in the drawing-room, I trust you've been informed of our investigation. Nathaniel poured him a drink, his movements calm. Only that the Crown has taken interest again. 7 years is a long time to rouse the dead. Rowley smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. Indeed, but certain discrepancies have come to light. The matter of Miss Ashcombe's return, for instance. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. Eleanor has nothing to do with her father's death. Death? Rowley raised an eyebrow. Ah, so you believe him dead? Nathaniel paused. He vanished without trace. Quite, but perhaps not without witness. At that, the door opened. Eleanor stood there, pale as the winter light spilling through the window. Sir Edmund, she greeted, voice even. "I had not expected to see you here." "Nor I, you, Miss Ashcombe," he replied smoothly, "though I dare say your timing is curious." She ignored the insinuation and turned to Nathaniel. "May I speak with you privately?" Nathaniel inclined his head. "Excuse us, Sir Edmund." They walked out together into the corridor. The tension between them was taut as a drawn bow. "What did he mean by that?" Nathaniel demanded. "Why is the Crown reopening the case?" She hesitated. "Because there are things they were never meant to find." "What things, Eleanor?" She met his gaze. "Documents, records my father kept, names, transactions, shipments through Dover. They think he was smuggling information to France during the war." He stared at her. "Espionage?" She nodded. "And worse, he wasn't alone." "Then who?" "My brother," she said quietly. "Henry." Nathaniel exhaled sharply, stepping back. "Henry Ashcombe died in France. I saw the report myself." "Reports lie," she whispered. He stared at her, the truth dawning, slow and heavy. "You've been protecting him." "Yes." "Eleanor, I couldn't tell you then," she said, her voice trembling now. "You were already bound for the front. If they had known you loved me, if they'd known you might stand between us, they'd have used you, Nathaniel. I had to disappear. It was the only way to keep you safe." For a long moment he could not speak. His breath came slow, measured. "So everything I believed," he said finally, "was a lie." "No." She stepped closer. "Everything between us was real. I left because it was real." The anguish in her tone cracked something in him, but not enough to bridge the years of silence. He turned away, his hand tightening at his side. "Then you should have trusted me." "I couldn't. And now?" Her answer was barely a whisper. "Now it's too late." That night, Nathaniel sat alone in the library, the storm pressing hard against the windows. The fire threw long, uncertain shadows across the walls. He unfolded her old letters one by one, reading until the ink blurred, until the ache behind his eyes became unbearable. Then he took up his pen, reached for a clean sheet of paper, and began to write slowly, deliberately. "Eleanor, if you think me unchanged, you are wrong. The war did not end when I returned. It only learned to speak in quieter ways. You say you protected me, but you forget. I never asked for safety, only truth. If your ghosts have followed you here, then let them come. I will not run again." He stopped, staring at the half-finished letter. Then, with a sigh, he folded it carefully and placed it inside the old mahogany box, beside the one he had written years ago. 2 letters now, both unsent. The storm outside broke suddenly, thunder shaking the glass. Nathaniel rose and went to the window, and there, through the sheets of rain, he saw a lone figure crossing the courtyard toward the chapel ruins. Eleanor. Without hesitation, he grabbed his coat and followed her into the storm. The chapel stood at the edge of the lake, its roof half collapsed, its stones blackened with age. Eleanor was there, her cloak whipping in the wind as she knelt beside the old altar, hands trembling. "Eleanor!" Nathaniel shouted over the wind. She turned, startled, clutching something against her chest. A bundle wrapped in oilskin. "What are you doing?" "I have to hide this," she cried. "If they find it, Henry's as good as dead." He moved closer, reaching for her. "You can't keep doing this alone. I've no choice. Then let me help you." For the first time, she broke, tears mingling with the rain. "You don't understand. If you stand beside me, they'll destroy you too." "Then let them try," he shouted, his hand closing over hers. "I lost you once because of pride and silence. I'll not lose you again to fear." Their eyes locked. years of pain, love, and regret collapsing into that single defiant heartbeat. Lightning split the sky, and in that flash, Nathaniel saw what she held, a sealed packet bearing the crest of the crown, the very evidence that could damn them both. He pulled her to her feet, voice low but firm. "Whatever this is, we face it together now." She looked at him through the rain, eyes glistening. "Then you'll have to decide, Nathaniel. Are you willing to die for a truth you never asked for?" He didn't answer. The wind howled, the rain fell harder, and somewhere beyond the storm, the bells of Harcourt began to toll. The masquerade of lies. The invitation had arrived under the guise of civility, gold-embossed, perfumed, bearing the seal of Lady Clarissa Denham, widow of the late Viscount Denham, and mistress of half of Yorkshire's social intrigue. The note within was written in her precise, serpentine hand. "My dearest Lord Harcourt, it has been far too long since Harcourt graced my ballroom. I insist upon your attendance at my winter masquerade, for it would be a scandal were you to remain hidden much longer, and I do so love a scandal. Do bring your guest. I understand Miss Ashcombe has returned to us." Nathaniel had read it once, then tossed it into the fire. 2 hours later, he retrieved it half-burnt and sent word of their attendance. He told himself it was for appearances, that he needed to learn what the magistrate and his allies were saying about Eleanor's return. But the truth ran deeper, rawer. He wanted to see her beyond the walls of Harcourt, to see if she could still smile as she once had, when the world had not yet turned against them. The night of the masquerade arrived with biting cold. The roads glittered with frost, lanterns flaring in the dark as carriages lined the drive before Denham Hall. Music drifted through the open doors, violins and laughter mingling like wine and smoke. Eleanor stepped from the carriage in a gown of deep midnight blue, her shoulders bare save for the sweep of a silk shawl. A silver mask hid half her face, but Nathaniel would have known her anywhere, by the tilt of her head, the quiet grace of her movement. "Are you certain about this?" she asked softly as they approached the grand steps. "No," he said truthfully. Her lips curved. "Then we agree on something." Inside, the ballroom glittered. Hundreds of candles reflected in tall mirrors, chandeliers swaying with the faint motion of the dance below. Women shimmered in jewels and silks. Men wore the smirk of privilege. Yet beneath the splendor lurked the unmistakable scent of gossip, sweet and poisonous. Nathaniel felt the eyes that followed them as they entered. Whispers bloomed like ivy. "She's returned! After all this time! Is it true her father was a traitor? And she with him?" Eleanor kept her chin high, every inch the lady she once was, though he could see the tremor in her gloved hands. Lady Clarissa swept toward them, golden mask perched delicately on her curls. "Lord Harcourt and Miss Ashcombe, how delightful!" "Lady Denham," Nathaniel replied with a bow. Clarissa's smile was honeyed. "It has been 7 years since your disappearance, Miss Ashcombe. I dare say society will be intrigued." "Society," Eleanor said coolly, "is easily entertained by things it does not understand." "Touché," Clarissa murmured. Her gaze flicked toward Nathaniel, lingering. "Do take care, my lord. Some ghosts return not for closure, but for company." With that, she drifted away like smoke. Eleanor exhaled slowly. That woman could slice a throat with a smile. Nathaniel's lips twitched. "She usually does." The Sire orchestra struck up a waltz. Nathaniel extended his hand. "Dance with me." Her hesitation was brief, a flicker of memory perhaps of another night long ago. Then she placed her hand in his, and they joined the sea of masked faces. The moment his arm slipped around her waist, the years between them collapsed. The music rose and fell like breath, their eyes meeting and holding as they moved together through the turning crowd. "I had almost forgotten," she murmured, "how well you dance." "You forget little," he said softly. Her gaze flickered up to his. "Then you remember too much." He smiled faintly. "Perhaps." But there was something in her eyes, a flicker of fear, sharp and fleeting, that made his hold tighten. "What is it?" he asked. "Nothing," she said, though her glance darted past his shoulder. He turned subtly, catching sight of a man near the edge of the floor. Tall, dark-haired, unmasked. Watching her. "Who is he?" Nathaniel asked. Eleanor's breath caught. "No one. You're lying." She looked back at him, eyes bright behind her mask. "Then dance, Nathaniel, before the world notices." He did, but even as they moved, his mind turned like a blade. Later that evening, as laughter and champagne flowed freely, Nathaniel slipped away into the side gallery. The masked man was there, speaking quietly with Sir Edmund Rowley. Nathaniel stepped closer, silent as shadow. "She's hiding something, I tell you," Rowley was saying. "The documents didn't vanish. Her father's secrets are still out there." "And Harcourt?" the other man asked, his voice low, foreign accented. Rowley gave a short laugh. "The fool still believes she's innocent. That's precisely why we let her return." Nathaniel froze. The stranger's tone turned sharper. "And if she finds the evidence before we do?" "Then neither of them will live to deliver it," Rowley replied smoothly. A slow, searing rage unfurled in Nathaniel's chest. He moved before thought could stop him. "You'll find that difficult," he said evenly. Both men turned. Rowley blanched. "Lord Harcourt, leave," Nathaniel said. The stranger's eyes narrowed. "And if we don't?" Nathaniel took one step forward, voice low and steady. "Then I stop asking politely." Something in his gaze made the man reconsider. With a quiet curse, he slipped away, Rowley following. Nathaniel remained for a long moment, breathing hard, his hand clenched at his side. Then he turned, and found Eleanor standing at the end of the corridor. She had heard. Her mask trembled in her hand. "They know," she whispered. "They know about the documents." He closed the distance between them in 3 strides. "Where are they, Eleanor?" She shook her head. "Hidden. But they're watching me. They've been watching since London. I thought if I came back here, I could bury it all." He caught her shoulders gently. "You can't fight this alone anymore. You must trust me." Her eyes shone with anguish. "I do. That's what terrifies me." Their breath mingled, his hand rising, almost without thought, to brush a strand of hair from her cheek. "Eleanor!" She stepped back, shaking her head. "Don't! Not now!" "Why?" "Because I don't want to have to lose you twice." The words hung between them like smoke. Tender, aching, final. A shout echoed from the main hall. Rowley's voice, raised in false joviality, calling for the next dance. The moment was gone. Eleanor replaced her mask, her voice steady again. "We should leave before they notice." He nodded, though his heart rebelled against it. As they turned toward the exit, Lady Clarissa appeared once more, fan fluttering idly. "Leaving so soon, my dear? The night is young." "Too young," Nathaniel replied curtly. Her eyes gleamed. "Be careful, Lord Harcourt. You're playing a dangerous game." He gave her a tight smile. "Then let's hope I win." Outside, the snow had begun again, soft flakes falling on the carriage as they departed. Inside, the air between them was charged with everything unsaid. Eleanor broke the silence first. They'll come for the papers. Then we'll move them before they do." Her hand twisted in her lap. "You don't understand, Nathaniel. If they find out what's written there, it won't just be Henry they destroy. It will be the entire Ashcombe name, and yours for helping me." He turned to her, voice low and fierce. "I've lived through war and scandal, Eleanor. I can survive both, but I will not survive losing you again." She looked at him, her lips trembling. "You don't mean that." "I do." For a long moment, neither spoke. The carriage wheels hummed over the frozen road, the world outside dissolving into white. Then, softly, she said, "If we do this, there's no going back." He reached for her hand. This time she did not pull away. "Then let's not." Back at Harcourt Hall, Nathaniel locked the doors and drew the curtains. He built a fire and turned to her. "Show me where you hid them." Eleanor hesitated, then crossed to the old writing desk in the corner. She slid open a hidden panel beneath the drawer and withdrew a small bundle of parchment tied with faded string. "The last letters my father wrote before he vanished," she said, "correspondence with names you'd recognize, ministers, merchants, officers, all tied to a smuggling ring funneling intelligence to France. Henry was caught in it, and I—" She trailed off. "You what?" "I took these from his study the night before I left. I couldn't destroy them. They're the only proof of what truly happened." Nathaniel's brow furrowed. "And you think Rowley wants them for himself?" "I know he does. He's part of it." He stared at the papers, then at her. "Then we expose him." She shook her head violently. "If you do that, he'll drag us both down. You'll lose everything." He smiled faintly. "Perhaps it's time I did." Eleanor's voice broke. "Nathaniel, please, you can't keep saving me. Not again." He stepped closer, eyes steady. "I'm not saving you, Eleanor. I'm standing beside you." She looked at him, breath trembling, every wall she'd built beginning to crumble. And for the first time in 7 years, she let herself fall. His hands framed her face, his forehead resting against hers. The firelight danced across their skin, two souls caught between ruin and redemption. "I never stopped loving you," she whispered. "I know," he breathed. "Neither did I." Outside, the snowstorm deepened, hiding Harcourt Hall from the world. Inside, the truth waited in silence, fragile, deadly, and ready to burn them both. A promise in ashes. The fire had burned low in the hearth, its light gilding the edges of Eleanor's hair. She sat before it, the bundle of papers resting on her knees, her expression caught somewhere between defiance and despair. Nathaniel watched her from the shadows, one hand braced on the mantelpiece. He had faced battlefields, seen friends fall and nations crumble, but never had he felt so utterly powerless as now. Before this woman, he could neither save nor let go. "Will you tell me everything?" he asked quietly. Eleanor's eyes lifted to his. "You wouldn't believe it if I did. Try me." She hesitated, then untied the string binding the papers. The ink had faded, but the words remained sharp enough to wound. She handed him the first letter, her father's hand, unmistakable. "My dear Eleanor, if this reaches you, it means I have failed. They have taken everything, our name, our honor, our lives. Do not trust anyone bearing the seal of the crown. They serve themselves now, even Harcourt is not safe among them. Burn this when you've read it, or they will burn you for it." Nathaniel felt the blood drain from his face. "He named me." Eleanor nodded. "He meant the title, not you, but they twisted it. When the accusations came, your family's estate was tied to the investigation. That's why I left, to protect you." His jaw tightened. "You think disappearing for 7 years protected me? Eleanor, it destroyed me." She turned away, voice breaking. "And if I'd stayed, they would have destroyed you too." Outside, the wind howled across the moors, battering against the shutters like a warning. Somewhere in the distance, a horse neighed, and then another answered. Nathaniel crossed to the window, parting the curtain just enough to see 2 riders dismounting near the gate. "Damn it," he muttered. "They've found us." Eleanor rose sharply. "Rowley! And the foreigner he was meeting at Denham Hall?" She moved to the desk, gathering the papers. "We have to hide these." "No," he said, firmly. "We have to end this." Minutes later, they were in the old cellar. Cold stone walls, the scent of damp earth. Nathaniel struck a lantern and set it on a crate, its light flickering across the room. Eleanor unrolled one of the letters, spreading it on the table. "This one," she said. "It mentioned shipments through Whitby under the guise of medical supplies. If we could find the manifests." Footsteps above. Heavy, deliberate. Nathaniel blew out the lantern. Too late. A door creaked open upstairs, followed by Rowley's voice, mockingly genial. "Lord Harcourt, I hope I'm not intruding. A matter of national concern, you understand." Eleanor's hand found Nathaniel's in the dark. "Don't let them take the papers," she whispered. "I won't." The cellar door groaned open. Light spilled down the stairway, Rowley, armed, with 2 men behind him. "Touching," Rowley drawled, eyes glinting. "Harcourt hiding a fugitive in his ancestral cellar. How poetic!" Nathaniel stepped forward. "You have no warrant." "Don't need one," Rowley said smoothly. "Not when it's treason." Eleanor's voice was calm, almost eerily so. "You're a coward, Edmund. You always were." Rowley's smile thinned. "And you, my dear, were always too clever for your own good." He nodded to his men. "Search the place." The next moments blurred into motion, boots pounding, furniture overturned, papers scattering. Nathaniel moved like a man possessed. He lunged, catching one of the intruders by the arm, wrenching the pistol free and slamming him into the wall. Rowley fired. The shot grazed Nathaniel's shoulder, spinning him half around. Eleanor screamed his name. The lantern hit the floor, shattering, flame licking across spilled brandy from a broken bottle nearby. The fire caught fast, too fast. Smoke billowed, thick and acrid. Rowley swore and backed toward the door. "To hell with this!" He grabbed the bundle of papers from the table, or what he thought was the bundle, and fled up the stairs with his men. Eleanor knelt beside Nathaniel, pressing a trembling hand to his wound. "You're bleeding." "It's nothing," he coughed. "Did he take them?" She shook her head, tears streaking her face. "No, he took the decoys." He laughed even as the smoke thickened. "You thought of everything." "Not everything," she whispered. "I didn't plan on losing you again." "Then don't." He pulled her toward the narrow servants' passage, half collapsed but still open. They stumbled through it together, emerging into the freezing night as the flames devoured the east wing behind them. By dawn, Harcourt Hall was a blackened shell. The fire brigade from the nearest town had arrived too late. What they found were ashes, and the whispers of scandal already stirring. Nathaniel stood on the hill overlooking the ruins, arm bandaged, coat dusted with soot. Eleanor stood beside him, her face pale but unbroken. "You could still leave," he said quietly. "Take the papers, disappear again." Her gaze lingered on the smouldering wreckage. "I've spent 7 years running from ghosts, Nathaniel. It's time I face them." He looked at her, really looked, and saw not the frightened girl who had vanished all those years ago, but the woman who had survived betrayal, exile, and loss, proud, defiant, his equal in every way. "Then we face them together," he said. Eleanor's lips curved faintly. "You realize what that means?" "That I've finally learned what loyalty costs?" he asked. She met his gaze steadily. That love costs more. As the sun broke through the lingering smoke, she reached for his hand. He took it, fingers lacing through hers. Behind them, the estate that had once defined his life burned to cinders. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, and the faint, perilous hope of redemption. And in that fragile dawn, amidst ruin and ash, they made their unspoken promise. Whatever the cost, they would not run again. The dream that wouldn't die. London, a city built on secrets. Smoke from the river curled through narrow alleys, lamplight trembling on cobblestones slick with rain. The world had shrunk to whispers and footsteps, to the sound of carriages in the fog. Nathaniel Harcourt walked among them like a man suspended between two lives, the one he had once lived in honour, and the one he now fought for in defiance. Eleanor Ashcombe was gone. At least that's what the city believed. Rumours spoke of her flight to the continent, of forged papers and false names. But Nathaniel knew better. She was here, somewhere among the darkened corners of this city, still chasing the last fragments of the truth that had already cost them everything. And he intended to find her. He found her 3 nights later at the edge of the docks, standing in the mist like a ghost returned from some other world. Her cloak was drenched, her hair unbound, her eyes fever-bright with exhaustion. For a long moment, neither spoke. The river moved between them, grey, restless, endless. "You shouldn't have come," she said finally. "You knew I would," he answered. Her laugh was soft and bitter. "You always did have a talent for disobedience." "Only where you were concerned." He stepped closer, and she turned away, staring out at the fog rolling over the water. "It's over, Nathaniel," she murmured. "Rowley's dead. The papers are gone. There's nothing left to fight for." "There's us," he said quietly. She closed her eyes. "There can't be." "Why not?" "Because they'll never stop watching. Because the moment they learn you helped me, they'll drag you before Parliament as a traitor." He smiled, a weary, rueful thing. "Let them. They've called me worse." "Don't," she said sharply. "Don't throw your life away for me." He took another step forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "You were never something I could throw away." The wind howled off the Thames, lifting the edges of her cloak. She looked at him then, really looked, and what she saw there broke through the last of her defences. He looked older now. The lines around his eyes were deeper, his hair dusted with grey. But beneath it all was the same fierce, unyielding man who had once promised her the world beneath the ash tree at Harcourt. And she still loved him for it, even when she knew she shouldn't. "Do you remember," she asked quietly, "the night before you left for France?" "How could I forget?" "You told me you'd come back for me." "I did. But not as the man I knew," she whispered. "The war changed you." He shook his head. "No, losing you did." Something inside her gave way then. The grief, the years, the silence. She took a step toward him, then another, until his hand found hers. It was a simple touch, but it was everything they had fought for. They found refuge in a safe house on Fleet Street, a crumbling tenement owned by a sympathetic publisher. By day, Nathaniel moved through the city in disguise, seeking allies among the few men still loyal to truth rather than politics. By night, they spoke in quiet tones, piecing together the final threads of the conspiracy her father had died trying to expose. The Crown's smuggling network had not ended with Percival Ashcombe. It lived on, in the hands of powerful men who traded secrets for gold, using the war as cover. Nathaniel's own regiment had been implicated, and now he understood why they had wanted the Ashcombe papers destroyed. "I can bring them down," he said one evening, spreading the recovered fragments across the table. but I'll need your testimony." Eleanor shook her head. "If I stand before them, they'll hang me for treason before they ever listen. Then I'll speak for you, and they'll hang you with me." He leaned back, eyes tired but resolute. "Then let them hang us both." She stared at him, voice trembling. "You'd die for this?" He met her gaze. "No, I'd die for you." The days blurred into a fever of planning and pursuit. They could hear the machinery of the city grinding against them, footsteps that paused too long outside, letters intercepted before they arrived. But through it all, the quiet between them deepened, not silence, but understanding. They were bound now, not by circumstance, but by choice. The confrontation came at dawn, in the House of Lords itself. Nathaniel stood before the assembled peers, his arms still bound from the fire, his face pale but unflinching. In his hand he held the final letter, signed by Rowley himself, implicating half the ministry in the sale of military intelligence. He spoke slowly, deliberately, his voice echoing through the marble chamber. "We went to war, believing we fought, for honour. But honour does not lie in the hands of men who profit from betrayal. I present to you the evidence of that betrayal, and the name of the woman who paid its price in exile and silence." He turned then, and Eleanor stepped from the shadows. Gasps rippled through the chamber. She lifted her chin, her voice steady. "My name is Eleanor Ashcombe. My father died for these papers. I will not let his truth die with him." The uproar that followed was thunderous. Some shouted treason, others called for mercy. But amid it all, Nathaniel's gaze never left her. He knew, in that instant, that he had chosen his path, not as a lord, not as a soldier, but as a man who refused to let the woman he loved carry the world's blame alone. The aftermath was chaos. By evening, warrants had been issued, resignations forced, titles stripped. The Crown, shamed but cautious, offered Eleanor a conditional pardon in exchange for silence. She refused it. Instead, she and Nathaniel left London under cover of darkness, not fugitives now, but free souls in search of peace. They returned to the north, to what remained of Harcourt Hall. Winter had softened the ruins. Grass grew where fire had raged. The air smelled of ash and frost and faint hope. Nathaniel stood at the edge of the lake, where the old chapel once stood. Eleanor came to stand beside him, her gloved hand brushing his. "So this is where it ends," she said softly. He shook his head. "No, this is where it begins." She smiled faintly. "Ever the optimist, ever the fool in love," he corrected. For a moment, silence fell, the kind that doesn't ache anymore, only breathes. Then she turned to him, eyes luminous in the fading light. "Do you still believe in fate?" He took her face gently in his hands. "No," he murmured, "only in you." Their kiss was quiet, reverent, not the desperate union of lost years, but the calm surrender of two souls who had finally come home to one another. Months later, travellers spoke of the rebuilt manor on the moors, of a reclusive couple who rarely left, whose laughter carried faintly across the fields when the wind turned west. They said the lord was scarred but kind, and his lady kept the old chapel in bloom, as though tending a grave and a promise both. And sometimes, on misted mornings, a single candle could be seen burning in the chapel window, a light that never seemed to die. The promise he couldn't keep the years had been gentle on the land, if not on the heart. The moors stretched endless and gold beneath the late autumn sun, the wind moving slow through the tall grass like the breath of a sleeping giant. The ruins of the old chapel still stood, softened now by ivy and wildflowers, their stones warmed by the years, and beyond them where once stood a burned and broken hall, rose Harcourt Manor anew. It was smaller now, simpler, but every wall, every window bore the touch of hands that had rebuilt not just a house, but a life. Inside, silence reigned, not the kind born of emptiness, but of peace hard won. Nathaniel Harcourt sat by the window of his study, watching the horizon dissolve into the haze of dusk. His hair had silvered at the temples, and his hands, once steady on sword and pen alike, trembled faintly as he turned the pages of a worn leather journal. On the first page was a name written in his own hand, Eleanor Ashcombe Harcourt. Below it, a single line she had written herself years ago. Love, if it means anything at all, must be brave enough to break us. He closed the book gently. Outside, the last of the light was fading, the sky awash in rose and violet. Somewhere beyond the moors, he could hear the faint cry of a curlew, and with it came memory. It had been 5 years since she'd gone. The fever had come one winter without warning, a simple chill, the physician said, that worsened with every breath until even the firelight seemed too far to reach. She had died as she had lived, quietly, without complaint, her hand in his, her last words a whisper that still haunted the walls of his soul. "You promised me once," she had said, "that if you ever found peace, you'd let it stay, even if I could not." He had promised. But peace, he'd learned, was the cruelest of liars. He rose slowly, crossing to the mantel where an old locket hung from a black ribbon. Inside was a miniature, her portrait, painted before the war. The same eyes, the same quiet strength. He touched it lightly, as if afraid she might vanish if he pressed too hard. Then, as the last of daylight slipped away, he took up his coat and stepped outside. The path to the chapel was overgrown, the air thick with the scent of heather and damp earth. He walked slowly, each step a conversation with ghosts. Inside, candles flickered on the altar, always 3. He lit them each night, just as she had once done. One for memory, one for mercy, and one for what might have been. He set the journal down before them and opened it to a blank page. Then, with a hand that trembled only slightly, he began to write. "Eleanor, it has taken me half a lifetime to understand the meaning of your silence. You did not leave because you stopped loving me. You left because you loved me enough to let me stay behind. I used to believe a promise broken was a promise lost. But perhaps some vows live longer than we do, carried in the things we build, in the laughter we leave behind, in the way the light still finds its way through ruin. If you can hear me, then know this. I kept the dream, even when I couldn't keep you." He paused, staring at the ink until it blurred, and for the first time in years, he smiled. A real smile. As he stood, a gust swept through the broken arches of the chapel, extinguishing the nearest candle. He laughed softly at that, the same sound she once said she loved, rough and unguarded. "Always the last word, Aunt. You?" he murmured to the empty air. The wind answered with a sigh that might have been her name. He turned then, stepping out into the twilight. The moors stretched before him, endless, luminous in the dying light. For a moment he thought he saw her, just ahead on the ridge, in the shimmer of the mist. Her cloak pale, her hair caught in the wind, her face turned toward him in that quiet, knowing way. He blinked, and she was gone. But the ache in his chest had eased, and in its place came something gentler, a peace that no longer needed to stay hidden. That night, the manor stood quiet beneath a sky thick with stars. The servants spoke of a calm unlike any before, as though the house itself were finally at rest. By morning, they found him in the chapel, slumped beside the altar, his hand resting on the open page of her journal. The ink had dried where his words ended. Love, if it means anything at all, must be brave enough to break us. His face was peaceful, almost smiling, and beside him the 3 candles had burned to their ends, though no one could recall lighting them. Years later, travellers still came to the moors. They said, on certain misted evenings, one could hear laughter carried faintly across the fields, a man's voice and a woman's answering it. They said that sometimes when the sun set just right, 2 figures could be seen walking hand in hand through the heather toward the chapel, never hurried, never lost. And those who believed in such things whispered that some promises, though broken in life, are kept in eternity. Because love, once spoken in truth, is never truly silenced.